Good evening, everyone. It's Tony here from Locks to Reads on day 9 of Remembrance Reads, and I have only one book to talk about today, and that is Ernest Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms. Because apart from following the Brentford Newcastle game, a 3-1 victory to Brentford, I have done nothing else but read this today to get it finished. The reason I did that was because I'd reached the point where I was either going to put it down and forget all about it, and therefore never finish it, or I needed to finish it. I felt momentum was important in this. I finished it. What do I think of it? This is the first Ernest Hemingway book I've ever read. I'm familiar with the idea of his style from conversations about Ernest Hemingway, and I'm aware that this is built partly on his own experiences in World War One. It's set in Italy, and the lead character, whose name I've already forgotten. How have I already forgotten? Does it even mention? It must be mentioned. They call him Tenente, as in lieutenant, quite a lot. God, it's embarrassing that I can't even remember his name. I'm going to call him Nick, even though that's probably not what his name is. And he's part of an ambulance corps in the Italian army, but has volunteered as an American. He can speak Italian. I think the implication is he is of Italian-American descent, which I'm not sure is the case with Hemingway. While he's there, he meets and falls in love. Well, he meets and starts having sort of a fling with a British nurse called Catherine. That initially I don't think he's in love, and I don't think he even would pretend to be that he was in love, but he gradually somehow falls for Catherine, and they have that is the second. Basically, there's two prongs to this story. One is the war story, the events around the ambulance service, and particularly the sort of change when the Germans and the Austrians pushed the Italians back. I mentioned yesterday that in that counterattack they pushed them back nearly as far as Venice, and this book covers some of that. It's very good, I think, on the war stuff. I think the chapters around the initial retreat and the difficulties of getting thousands of people, thousands of troops, hundreds of vehicles, carts, horses in retreat is really well expressed, and the chaos and the distrust is all very reflected very well in there here, I think. I'm less convinced by the love story, particularly now. I don't know, is this going to spoil it? Particularly after Catherine becomes pregnant. I don't. It just doesn't. I'm not entirely convinced. I'm not entirely convinced by Catherine. Basically, is introduced when she's introduced. Her previous partner has been killed in World War One, and there's something a bit creepy about the way Hemingway presses himself on. So I call him Hemingway now. That it's this, which is unfair because I don't know whether Hemingway was like that or not. I know rumours about Hemingway's drinking and his fucking, for want of a better word, but I don't really know that much about him to say that's what he was like. But I initially felt that if there was something slightly wrong about it, particularly when he wasn't claiming to be in love with her, but he was telling her that he was in love with her. She knew that he was lying at that point. But they fall in love. She gets pregnant, and then the war goes on, and she ends up in hospital about giving birth. That does not go particularly well. The end. Again, I'm trying to avoid absolute spoilers. I do actually think, having said that the love story isn't that convincing, I do actually think that the last chapter is pretty moving and pretty well written. I don't. It took me a little while to get used to Hemingway's style. I kind of was aware of what it was going to be like, but when you first started reading it, the sort of constant dum da dum da dum da dum dum of short sentences, short words, lack of literary frippery um, seemed it takes kind of a bit of use. Once you get used to it, though, I think it's actually it's the right style for what he's trying to write. I think here, um, there's no euphemisms, there's no dodging issues. It's it's pretty direct. It's pretty. I don't know if the word honest is correct, um, because when an author is writing a story about his life that's based on his life, however loosely, how much honesty is involved is moot. I can't remember who it was I was reading. It might have been in A Dance to the Music of Time, actually, or it was in something else. But the talk about actually fiction is more honest than non-fiction when it's talking about people's lives, and you know more about a person who's written a semi-autobiographical novel of their life than you do about somebody that's written an autobiography. Because I think the theory was that they will be more truthful in a fictional work because they can pretend it's not them. Um, I'm not entirely convinced by that theory, but I think there's an element of Hemingway giving himself warts and all in this story. Um, I found he was a handsome man as a young man. I found some pictures of him in uniform, um, and I do want to know more about him as a person. And I'd like to read some. This wasn't a sort of point where I thought, oh God, I'm never gonna. I don't like this. Can't bother to finish it. Can't hate the writing, hate the style, hate everything, and I'm never going to read anything by him again. It has made me want to read more books of his. My temptation is to read the Spanish Civil War one, For Whom the Bell Tolls. But I'm going to leave it for a bit because I've got so much World War One stuff to read that I'm not going to get to it for a while. Um, as a World War One book, I think this is pretty good for giving you an idea of what happened in a place which isn't often covered by British literature and British, even by British historians. Um, it is obviously more important to the Italians and Austrians and the former countries of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Um, and it's still there's still a sort of vague issue around with Italy and Slovenia, I think it is, about Trieste, um, and what happened in World War One with Italy helped sow the seeds for the rise of Mussolini and his attempt to. Because they were promised, basically, Italy didn't come into the war straight away. They were promised lots of things by the Allies and came into the war in 1915. And when the peace treaty came along, Italy didn't quite get what it wanted, and that set up a whole, based on the number of people they'd lost, etc., etc. But the Italians came into the war. They didn't come into the war for self-defense. They came into the war for territorial gain. But that's beside the point with this. So we're coming up for 10 minutes. So is there anything more I can say about this book on my thing? I am doing this hot off the presses. So at the end, when I do my end, I might reconsider some of this over time, because sometimes a book, you read a book and it doesn't sit with you particularly well. But then it sort of gets under your skin over time, and you find yourself thinking about it more deeply in the sort of following weeks. So we'll see about whether that has an effect. I mean, the backs here says a love story of immense drama and uncompromising passion, and I don't think that's true at all. It's dramatic and passionate, and as I said, the last chapter is pretty hard. It's pretty moving. I think actually the last chapter saved it from me from being a complete, not a washout. That makes it sound like I hated it. I did enjoy reading it, but I think I didn't love it the way I thought I might. But we'll give Hemingway another go. And we'll see what book we'll pick up next. Um, so there you go. 10 minutes on today's reading. Um, if I was to give it a mark out of 10, I'd say 6, maybe 7. 3 stars on Goodreads. So that's what I think of it. I'm sorry this isn't an particularly in-depth review. I didn't take any. I am bad at taking notes of my reading, and I'm bad at highlight. And with this, I've just sort of been bad at highlighting bits that I thought were important. Um, there was a good line from Catherine, which I've highlighted, which is vice is a wonderful thing. Catherine said the people who go in for it seem to have a very good taste about it. But yeah, that's it. I will speak to you all tomorrow for day 10. And have a good one. And I'll talk about that again at the end of the month when I do my review of everything I've read. As I said, because things pop into your head about a book afterwards. I wonder whether the last chapter might come back to haunt me a bit. But anyway, that's it. Have a good one, and I will speak to you all tomorrow. Bye bye.